Good evening, and welcome to night 2 of our Lenten Mission. Please join us in our opening song, which can be found in your Guerin songbook, number 7, Change Our Hearts, O Lord. Again, that's in your Guerin songbook, number 7. Please stand.
A reading from the Gospel of Mathew. From that time on, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer greatly from the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed on the third day, be raised. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. God forbid, Lord, no such thing shall ever happen to you. He turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are an obstacle to me. You are thinking not as God does, but as human beings do. Then Jesus said to his disciples, Whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself. Take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What profit would there be for one to gain the whole world and forfeit his life? The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Our psalm response is, Let your mercy be on us, O God, as we place our trust in you. Let your mercy be on us, O God, as we place our trust in you. Let your mercy be on us, O God, as we place our trust in you. Your words, O Lord, are truth indeed, and all your works are ever faithful. You love justice and right, your compassion fills all creation. Let your mercy be on us, O God, as we place our trust in you. See how the eye God is watching, ever guarding all who wait
I hope you had a good night yesterday, thinking about what we talked about in my talk yesterday about how to form a personal relationship with Jesus. And one of the things that Jesus asks us to do as his followers is to take up the cross and follow him. And that is one of the hardest things to do. You know, it seems there was a woman who went to like a garage sale or a, flea market, and she saw this lamp which looked like an Aladdin's lamp, very exotic. She bought it, brought it home, and she started polishing it. As she was polishing it, a genie popped out. And the genie said, "Madam, you are my mistress. I am here to serve you. You can ask for anything. You can have 3 wishes." The lady thought for a while, and he said, "Okay, all my wishes are for my husband. Number 1, I want him to have eyes only for me, for nobody else. Number 2, I want him to take me with him wherever he goes. Number 3, I want him to look at me first thing in the morning and the last thing at night, and look at me every 10 minutes with great attention and great love." And the genie said, "Done." The woman turned into an iPhone 14. You know, we have all sorts of technology, and we think that somehow we should live a life without pain or suffering. Especially in America, you have toothache, Ambisol, the pain should go away. See, there are some physical pain we can take away, but there are psychological pain, emotional pain, you can't take it away. Suffering is our lot as human beings. You know, one of the hardest weeks for me as a priest was when I first came to Barrington. In 1 week, I had 3 funerals. On Monday, at the funeral of a gentleman in his early 50s, he had prostate cancer. He had so much money that he appointed a woman to follow the latest research in treating prostate cancer around the world, but he didn't beat it. On Wednesday, at the funeral of a little boy who had a tumor in his brain, he was 8 years old. The anguish of the parents, I couldn't even imagine. And then on Saturday, at the funeral of a single mom, was left behind a little baby. And the parents of that woman had just buried their adult son a few months earlier. And I remember talking to the father and the mother, preparing for the funeral. And the father at one point looked at me and said, "Father Britto, if we didn't have faith, how would we face this?" So the question is, as Christians, the way we look at the cross, the way we face the cross is very different. See, the Hindus, I come from India, the Hindus think that, if you suffer, it is your karma. You heard that word. That is, you did something bad, and so you are suffering. The Buddhist will say, the root of all suffering is desire. So live without desire. The Muslims will say, yes, it is the will of God, just submit yourself and go. It is in our faith, there is a meaning to that. What did Jesus say in today's gospel that you heard? Jesus looks at Peter, who says, "Lord, this cannot happen to you. You cannot go to Jerusalem and die on the cross." And Jesus says, "You're not thinking as God does, but as human beings do." So in order to understand the cross, in order to understand suffering and pain in our life, we have to think like God, not like human beings. So, a few years ago, there was a Secretary General of the United Nations. His name was Dag Hammarskjöld. He died somewhere in the 50s. He was a great man who had dedicated his life for the cause of world peace. And when he was traveling somewhere to Africa in order to bring some nations together, his plane was sabotaged and he was killed. And he was a single person. He never married. He lived his life for this. And so when his body was brought to his native country, I think it was Sweden, and it was lying in state, and people came to pay their respects. And ultimately his own family came, and they placed a wreath on the coffin, and on the wreath was this black ribbon, and on it there was only one word: why? Why? How many times have we asked that question? Why? Why me? Why now? I've been a good person. I have lived my faith, and yet this happened to me. Do you know what I mean? I was just talking to my niece when I was in India. One of my nieces, she was dating this guy and had broke up, and she was heartbroken. And she said, for a while I didn't go to church. I was so upset with God. Because I said, why? Because I've been a good girl. And why did this happen to me? This is the question we all ask. A few years ago, when I was in Park Ridge, there was a gentleman who was, I think, 40 years old. 40 years old. He was training for the Iron Marathon, what do you call Ironman. They do this very strenuous thing, swims for for the distance, and then you bicycle, and then you run. He was fit. It was Father's Day. He was swimming, working out in a pool of his friend in Park Ridge, and he died. He had a heart attack. His young wife had a little baby in her arms and two other children. I had no words to console this widow. I remember that funeral. That was the line to the cemetery must have been, I don't know how many cars there were. So, this is a reality that we cannot avoid. So how do you face this? First thing I will tell people is, take away wrong ideas. People have some wrong ideas about suffering and pain and cross. For example, some people say, oh, it is a punishment. Something I did. Oh, but I didn't do anything. Why am I being punished? Have you heard that? Now, if that is true, think about it. Who got the most amount of suffering after Jesus? His mother. Am I right? She is called the mother of sorrows. Why is that? She didn't do it. She was innocent, and she got so much sorrow. Why is that? If it is a punishment. Think about Paul. You remember Paul when he was converted? And he was blind, and they sent Ananias, one of the early Christians, to him. And what does Jesus say to Ananias? He says, I will show him how much he has to suffer for the sake of my name. Paul has been chosen, and he says, I will show him how much he has to suffer for my name. And Paul does suffer. If you look at his second letter to the Corinthians, he lists all the suffering he had to bear. So it is not a punishment. Some others say, oh, it is a curse. God does not curse. What does God say in Prophet Jeremiah? My plans for you are life, not destruction. Our God does not curse. Oh, it is a test. Does God have to test me? He doesn't have to test me. He knows me. The Psalm says, Lord, you know me when I sit and when I stand. If I'm in the bottom of the ocean, you can see me. Night is not dark to you. Where can I hide from you? You cannot. See, I know that when you date, I remember before you said yes to your husband, how well you tested him. You pushed his buttons, didn't you? Men don't do that. Men are very simple, They just go along. So God doesn't have to test us. So suffering is not a punishment. It's not a test. It's not a curse. And then If that is the case, we must understand that there are some right way of looking at this. First of all, I want to say, what is a cross? See, sometimes, people think every form of suffering is a cross. Oh, this is my cross. It seems there was a parish mission like this, and the last day, the priest said to the people, please, if you have any religious objects, like if you have a cross or something, please lift it up and I will give a special blessing. A woman lifted up her husband because he was the cross. What I mean is, people think that every suffering is a cross. No. Because there are some crosses that we create for ourselves. Imagine, right? Because, if you have a headache, take Excedrin. Otherwise, you will become a headache to everybody else. Isn't that true? You see, sometimes we don't deal with situations in the right way and we cause suffering to ourselves. And that is not the cross. Cross is the inevitable suffering that we can never avoid. For example, you lose somebody, a sudden sickness, some tragedy. Those are the real crosses. When we get older, you see, as we get older, our body, our mind, do you know what I mean? There is an Irish comedian, his name is Hal Roach. He talks about getting old. He says, you're getting old when you sit in a rocking chair and you cannot get it started. You're getting old when your back goes out more than you do. You're getting old when you have the morning after without the night before. You're getting old when you bite into a steak and your teeth stay there. You see? So you get frustrated, like as you get older. I can tell you about myself. I still feel quite young, but I can't genuflect anymore. When I carry the Eucharist, I'm very careful how I come down the steps. I don't want to fall down. Do you know what I mean? We know our bodies. Yeah, that is a cross. We get impatient because as we get older, our body doesn't. That is a cross we have to bear. I have a nun sister who is older than me. She's a Franciscan. 10 years ago, she had a stroke, and now she has to walk with a walker. She hates it. She was so active. That is a cross. You can't do anything about it. Do you know what I mean? So how do we face those crosses? So we have to understand the right way. So what is it then? Suffering is the special portion that Jesus promises his disciples. Think about it. Suffering is the special portion that Jesus promises his disciples. You remember there was a story in the Gospel of Mathew, Mark, where the aunt of Jesus, that is the mother of what we call the sons of Zebedee, James and John, she comes to Jesus and says, my two sons, they are very smart. And so you have to give them very special places in your kingdom. Please make them sit down on the right and the left. I don't know if you remember that story. And Jesus says, okay, are they ready to drink the cup that I'm going to drink of? What is the cup? The cup of suffering. You remember what Jesus says in the Garden of Gethsemane as he's about to go to his suffering. He says, let this cup pass from me. So Jesus talks about the cup. And the mother said, oh yeah, they will do. They had no idea. So what Jesus is saying, if you want places on his right and his left, you better learn to drink the cup of suffering. He said in the gospel over and over again, if you want to be my disciple, take up the cross and follow me. It is a mark of the disciple. Jesus says again, blessed are you when men hate you, persecute you, and say all kinds of evil things about you. Rejoice and be glad because your names are written in heaven. Jesus said that. So you see, so it is the portion that God gives specially to his disciples. It is also the special gift he gives to his friends. There is a story told in the life of Teresa of Avila. Was the bigger Teresa. There's a little Teresa, that is a Teresa little flower. The other one is the Teresa of Avila. She was a doctor of the church. Both of them are doctors of the church. Anyway, Teresa of Avila, she had a very familiar relationship with Jesus. She would talk to him, he would talk back. And she went around Spain putting order in the convents of Carmel because the nuns were not behaving. And she was trying to reform the order of Carmel. And the way she traveled was by horse carriage. And once the horses got scared and the carriage toppled. And she fell down and of course hurt herself. And as she was picking herself up, she complained to Jesus. And she said, Jesus, I am working for you. I give my life to you. Why does this happen to me? Why do you treat me like this? Jesus said, Teresa, Teresa, don't you know this is how I treat my friends? And Teresa replied, no wonder you have so few friends. It's true. There is the same thing, similar story told in the life of Mother Teresa of Calcutta. Mother Teresa, even though she became a world famous figure, received the Nobel Prize for Peace, when she came back to Calcutta, she would go to the mother house and she will do what every other nun did. Wash her own sari, and she would bathe the people who are dying and assist them, pray with them, console them as they were dying. So she was holding this woman who was dying of cancer. And they say that towards the end of the cancer, you really get hit by a lot of pain. And these waves of pain would hit her. And the woman could see that she was in pain. And Mother Teresa would hold her tight and whisper in her ear, dear, when that pain hits you, that's when Jesus is lifting up your face to kiss you. And the next time the pain came again, when that pain hits you, Jesus is lifting up your face to kiss you. When Mother said that the third time, the woman said, Mother Teresa, please tell Jesus not to kiss me anymore. Do you know what I mean? But this is true. If you look at the life of the saints, all the saints, the saint who they say resembled Jesus the most was Francis of Assisi. And who received the wounds of Christ the first time? It was he, the stigmata. He suffered. No, in fact, there was a friend of his from Rome who would make these special handkerchiefs in order to wrap around his wounds. So suffering is the portion that Christ gives to his friends. So sometimes people don't want to be too close to Jesus because, it's dangerous. And then also we must remember it is through the cross salvation comes. Only through the cross. When you go to Stations of the Cross, what do we say? We adore you, O Christ, and we bless you, because by your holy cross you have redeemed the world. In the Gospel of John, Jesus says, unless a grain of wheat dies, it does not produce fruit. So there is no Easter Sunday without Good Friday. There is no empty tomb without the cross. And that is the way God worked. This is the logic of the gospel. Second Philippians, the letter of Paul to the Philippians, chapter 2, where Paul says, though he was in the form of God, Jesus did not keep his equality with God something to be held on to. He became obedient. He humbled himself, taking the form of a servant, and become obedient even unto the death of the cross. And therefore God has highly exalted him and gave him a name which is above every name, so that every knee should bend and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. So Jesus had to humble himself and die on the cross, and then he will be glorified. Look at that. And this is same thing, chapter 24 of Luke's Gospel. You remember those two disciples on Easter Sunday were walking away from Jerusalem because they were disillusioned. they didn't think that Jesus was risen. And they're walking away back to their own village. Jesus, catches up with them. They think he's a stranger. They don't recognize him. And then he says, why are you so sad? And they tell him, they tell him about Jesus. And we thought he was the Messiah. But then, this is the third day. Nobody has seen him. They still were not touched by the resurrection. And Jesus will say, oh, you foolish men, was it not necessary that the Son of Man should suffer and die and thus enter into his glory? Do you understand? So unless there is the cross, there is no glory. It's not something you and I will make, but God decided to do that. So it is through suffering that we become saved. So suffering is an opportunity to save ourselves and to save others. To save others. And then, suffering is also the way God sometimes breaks us in order to make something new. I think it happens to all of us. Sometimes God strips us naked of all the false things that we hold on to. And then he can use us to do whatever his work is. There was a woman who was a school teacher in Iowa, was Protestant, of course, evangelical. And all her life, she wanted to go and be a missionary in Africa. And she never got a chance. But many, many years later, she had an opportunity to go on a mission trip. And everything was planned. But at the last moment, the plans fell through. She was really disappointed. So she's sitting in the church trying to pray about this, and she's complaining to God. And as she's complaining to God, she remembered a prayer that an elderly lady she knew would say. And the prayer was something like, have thine own way, Lord, have thine own way. And then she comes home and she opens the Bible, as many Protestants do, to see what God was telling her. And she opened the page, Jeremiah chapter 18, where the prophet goes to the potter's house. The potter is making a pot out of clay. And as he's making the pot, it comes out all messed up. It doesn't look good. So what does he do? He breaks it down to clay again so that he can shape it into a new pot. And so this woman, inspired those words, wrote us a hymn which Protestant churches sing. We don't sing it. It's called, have thine own way, Lord, have thine own way. I am the clay, you are the potter. Make me and mold me after thy will. I will tell you, when I was a young seminarian, all through my early years, I was considered to be a good guy who did everything right. I never got into trouble. They sent me to I did my undergrad in physics. I did very well. So they sent me to do my master's. So I did my master's in physics. This is all in India. And I was about 27. And my superior said, okay, since you did well, we'll send you to the university to teach. Now, no seminarian. I was still not a priest. I was still on the way. They never sent a guy to teach in the college, it was like a big honor. So of course my head was a little bigger probably. But 2 months before, my superior calls me and says, oh, I'm changing your assignment. You're not going to college, but I'm sending you to the orphanage. Because somebody complained something about me which was not true. And he was punishing me for something I didn't do. So I was so mad. I remember I would go and sit in front of the Blessed Sacrament. I felt useless. I wouldn't even feel anything. I was so ready to leave everything. I was ready to go home. If I had left the seminary and went home, there would have been little Brittos running around. But God wouldn't let me. God wouldn't let me. Then I went to make a retreat with a Jesuit spiritual director for 9 days. In silence. He told me, you can't talk to anybody, no newspaper, no TV, nothing. Even the food was served to me in my room. He told me that I had to pray 5 hours a day. I remember, I said, 5 hours a day? How am I going to pray? It was okay. But you know what I found? I found that God had completely stripped away all the things I held on to. Oh, I was smart, I can do this, I had a good name. Even the good name I had in my community was gone. Guys began to wonder, why did they punish him? He must have done something wrong. Oh, when he was doing his graduate studies, maybe he fell in love with some girl and now they are punishing him. I never did any of that. I lost even my good name. It was like God said, you know what? I don't need you, but I want you. I'm telling you, now in my retirement I feel the same. You see, because God says, you need to make me your sole concern. You remember like the people of Israel, Prophet Hosea, he would say to the people of Israel, that is, God is speaking, says, I will lead her into the desert and speak tenderly to her. She will call me her Lord. What is he talking about? You see, when the people were going through the desert, what happened? If they wanted food, they had to call on God. If they wanted water, they had to call on God. If they didn't know where to go, God had to lead them. Their complete security was in God. But then, when they settled down in the Holy Land, Palestine, the land flowing with milk and honey, they forgot God. They began to put their trust in kings and fighting with other nations, their orchards and their wealth. They forgot what was. So sometimes God takes away everything so that he becomes our complete security. People, when everything is going well, do people think about God? Think about it. You see, that is why every country that becomes more affluent becomes less religious. Think about it. Europe, what has happened to Europe? What's happening to our country? You see, it's the poor that turn to God because they have nowhere to turn to. So sometimes God takes away our securities so that we will turn to him. Are you with me so far? Okay. All right. And for me, the most important is suffering is the invitation from God to become like Jesus. To become like Jesus. You have heard about Fulton Sheen, right? You know Fulton Sheen, the great bishop, great preacher. Towards the end of his life, he had open heart surgery and he was recovering in the hospital. And as he was recovering in the hospital, he celebrated Mass on his hospital bed. And some of his friends were there, family was there. And he gave a little homily which went like this. He said, when we die and go up to the gates of heaven, the Father will come and examine us to see if we look like his Son. And how will we look like his Son? If we have suffered. Just like he had nail prints on his hands and his feet, do we have them? Is our side pierced by the lance? In other words, if we have suffered like his Son, he will say, you look like my son. You are my son. You are my daughter. You are part of the family. Come on in. You see, we'll never be like Jesus in working miracles or healing people or even preaching, but we can be like Jesus. So that, we don't waste the suffering that God gives us. In order to, instead of becoming bitter, we can make ourselves better. So I think people have to understand suffering. So this is what Fulton Sheen said. I can remember when, after 4 months in the hospital, I began to recover. I was reading Mass on an altar constructed over the bed before a few priests and friends. I spontaneously gave a sermon, which I remember so well. I said that I was glad that I had open heart surgery because when the Lord comes to take us all, he will look to see if we have any marks of the cross upon ourselves. He will look at our hands to see if they are crucified from sacrificial giving. He will look at our feet to see if they have been thorn bruised and nail pierced, searching for lost sheep. He will look at our heart to see if that has been open to receive his divine heart. Oh, what joy is mine to have endured the minuscule imitation of his suffering on the cross by having a wounded side. Maybe he will recognize me from that scar and receive me into his kingdom. You know, it's very important to understand that. So I hope you understand the cross is something God gives us. But you cannot understand that unless you think like God, not like human beings. And also you have to think, in terms of eternity, not in this world. Do you know what I mean? Too many people look at suffering in this world. Yes, it doesn't make sense. But you look at it against the eternal life. This will pass. This is the path to glory and full life in the next world. There was a couple that was in their 50s, early 50s, and the wife decided to live healthy. So she told her husband, you know what, we're going to exercise every day, we're going to eat healthy, so only boiled vegetables, bran everything, no cookies, no pastries, no sugar, no red meat, nothing. Anyway, this went on for 10 years. They were healthy, but then they were in a terrible car accident and they both died. And they reached the pearly gates. St. Peter looked at them and says, hey guys, I wasn't expecting you. He says, you were living so healthy lives. I thought that you would be down there for another 30, 40 years. What happened? Well, we were in a terrible car accident. Oh, okay, come on in. Peter takes them to this beautiful villa with 20 bedrooms and 30 bathrooms, self-cleaning. I mean, it's a beautiful house, and he says, this is yours. Really? What is the mortgage? Mortgage? There is no mortgage. You are in heaven. Oh. And then he takes the guy to the kitchen, opens the kitchen window. It overlooks this beautiful golf course. And he says, you can play golf anytime you want, and you can make the golf course resemble any of the great courses on earth. Pebble Beach, Augusta, St. Andrews. What are the green fees? No green fees, you are in heaven. And then he puts him in his own monogrammed gold golf cart, drives him to the clubhouse. And as they reach there, he sees there are these huge tables laden with all the delicacies from all parts of the world. Peter says, you can eat anything you want. And the man says, how much? How much? You are in heaven, nothing. And what about cholesterol? What about diabetes? What about all the problems we had down on earth? Peter says, you will be eternally youthful and completely healthy. The man turns to his wife, takes off his hat and throws it to the ground, and he says, it's only because of you. And she said, what did I do? He said, but for you and those darn bran muffins, I would have been here 10 years ago. You know what I mean? See, if you don't understand heaven, this doesn't make sense. Because too many people look at the sufferings in this world because it doesn't make sense. A lot of the things that we suffer. I'm thinking of my own sister, the Franciscan. When she'll be in heaven, she'll throw off that walker and she'll fly through the skies from star to star. That's what we got to remember. We cannot think like human beings. So, how do you deal with it? Number one, don't go looking for suffering. Don't go looking for suffering. No, we are not sadists or masochists. Don't look for suffering. Sufferings will come. Do you know what I mean? People give it to you. So, wait for whatever comes, not looking for. As I said, if you have physical pain, go and see the doctor and see what. So there are ways that we can reduce our suffering. But there are suffering that we cannot. So that is the first thing. Second, don't grumble under the weight of the cross. Now we all like to complain, right? And we think, especially as we get older, we get together, there is a complaining club together, and we all complain. But does complaint make us feel better? at the end of it we feel worse. Am I right? Because we know everybody has burdens, and no, instead of that, because we have to remember that God knows what we can carry. I remember as a little boy hearing a story I've never forgotten. So a guy was always complaining to God, God, you've given me such a big cross to carry. Oh, it's too much. And he has a dream. In his dream, he sees Jesus, and Jesus says, come with me. And he's carrying his cross. And Jesus takes him to this huge warehouse. And it's filled with all sorts of crosses. Big ones, small ones, wooden ones, metallic ones, iron ones, things covered with soft velvet, and small ones, big ones, everything. So Jesus says, leave your cross there. Go and pick one you like. So the guy goes around. This is too big. This is too small. This is poking me here. This is not comfortable. Like 3 hours he's picking this, and finally he finds one. This is perfect. And he says, Jesus, I found the perfect cross for me. Jesus said, that's the one you came in with. The Lord knows. Sometimes we think, we know better than God. He knows what is something that, So, here is what St. Francis de Sales, a saint, said. Do not fear what may happen tomorrow. The same loving Father who cares for you today will care for you tomorrow and every day. Either he will shield you from suffering, or he will give you unfailing strength to bear it. Be at peace then, and put aside all anxious thoughts and imaginings. Trust in the Lord. Because God has taken care of you. If you look through your life, you will see that you had some tough situations, but God got you through that. The worst time I remember was when my father died. And I was a student at Marquette. It was a Saturday, I got the news. I was in the office writing my thesis. And all my life, I dreaded that moment. I said, how am I going to deal with it? And my car was parked under the highway, if you know Marquette, and I had to walk all the way to pick up the car. And I went to the parish. And the people came to know. People kept coming to give me comfort, the whole day. And then the next day was Sunday, and they announced that there will be a memorial mass for my father in the evening, which was not the usual mass, it was a special mass. There were more people for that than for the ordinary Sunday mass. And then my friends gathered together to pray, because the time was different. When the funeral was going on in India, we prayed here at home. And there was a lady in the parish, her name was Grace, God rest her soul. She would come every day in the morning and say, get in the car. We go for a drive. And we would drive east till lunchtime. We will stop somewhere, have lunch, then drive back. And she would say, I don't want you to be alone. She did this for 10 days. And there was a young girl in the parish, her name was Tracy. She would check on me every day. How are you doing today? And I remember one day, I'd just come back from school. I was sitting like a good American. I ate my dinner in front of the TV. And she called me and said, what are you doing? I said, I'm just watching some TV. She said, sit right there, I'm coming over. She made popcorn, sat with me, watched TV. You know what? God got me through my very difficult time. See, we forget that. God is there. And we have to remember that. To put our trust in Him, because He will not abandon us. And then the other thing is, remember that you don't have to settle everything in this world. A lot of people think, the good will win at the end. No, not necessarily. In this world, things don't get straightened out. God is, because the good people not always win. Sometimes bad people seem to win. Do you know what I'm trying to say? God doesn't settle all scores. But you have to remember that God is a God of justice. He will take care of things. We don't have to be vigilantes, to settle things. God will take. And that is important to put our, then let your suffering make you wise and compassionate. Suffering changes people. I remember after my mother died and I did her funeral, when I did funeral after that, I was a different person. Because I could feel the pain of people who had lost somebody. And that's why when I do funerals nowadays, the priest at one point incenses the coffin. I will say, when you go up, say hi to my parents. I'll say to the person in the casket. God produces compassion because you have suffered. See, Christ is the wounded healer. He was wounded so he can heal us. And when we suffer, we become more sensitive to the sufferings of others. People who have suffered are the ones who did great things. You know that. There was a French author who said, pain is the law underlying all masterpieces. Pain is the law underlying all masterpieces. If people created something of value, they had to suffer. When Michelangelo had to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, he was already old. He had to be on his back. That was painful. Beethoven created his 9th symphony when he was already deaf. Same thing, Milton wrote his Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained when he was blind. Great people have done with their handicaps, with their suffering. I'm not saying we have to look for suffering, but suffering can make us better. Then offer your suffering for your salvation and salvation of the world. Salvation of the world. As I said, it is through the cross we come to glory. Jesus saved the world through his suffering and death and resurrection. And we can do the same. The little sufferings we have, physical, mental, emotional, instead of allowing that suffering to make us bitter, to make us better. Think about Teresa of Child Jesus. She was 24 years old when she died. 24 years old. She became a great saint. She never left the walls of a convent. You know what she would do? She had tuberculosis. She had a lot of pain. There were nuns in the community who made her life difficult. She would offer all that for the conversion of sinners. And she became such a great saint that the church made her one of the 2 patrons of the missions, equal to Francis Xavier, who walked thousands of miles to preach the gospel. She is considered patroness of the missions. Can you imagine? She offered her suffering. As a parent, as a grandparent, sometimes you worry about the faith of your children, your grandchildren. Yes, you pray for them. Also offer up your suffering. And that is redemptive. That will save the world. And then carry your suffering to the Mass. We come to Mass. And whatever burdens we have, whatever suffering we have in that week, bring it to the altar. United with the sacrifice of Christ. And you will see how beautiful it becomes. It's no longer wasted because it benefits us here and hereafter. Okay? And then make your suffering a joyful ministry. Joyful ministry. There was a guy who went to the doctor and he was complaining of headaches. And so the doctor put him through a battery of tests and all the tests came up negative. And so finally the doctor called him into his office and he said, let me ask you some questions. And he said, tell me, he said, do you like to eat? He said, oh no, I eat very healthy, only boiled vegetables and no sugar, no pastries, no cookies, no red meat, nothing. Do you like to drink? Oh, I don't touch that stuff. I'm a teetotaler. Do you go to the movies? Oh, no. I go to church. Do you go to parties? No, only to church. Do you like to do anything for fun? Fun? No fun. Oh, no fun. Okay, did you say your pain is right here? The guy said, yes, doctor, my pain is right here. And the doctor said, I know what your problem is. Your halo is screwed too tight. A lot of good people, their halos are screwed too tight. I tell people, No, don't go around with a glum face. Yeah, life is hard for all of us. But realize that this God loves you. This God is in love with you. He gave His Son for us. He has blessed us with numerous gifts. And this God has watched over us. So, no, you, in spite of everything that we have, to be able to smile, to be able to be joyful, to carry the cross joyfully. I'm not saying that's easy, because if you realize this God is there even in our pain. My mom, she came to visit me in 2000 when I was in Barrington. And I invited her to come back 2001. She said, oh no, the flight is too long, too exhausting. So then 2002, I was supposed to go home to visit her in November. She died in July. And I was so mad. She never asked for anything. And the only thing she asked me for was Yardley's Roses body powder. And I couldn't find it. So I asked a friend who went to London. So she brought it. But I couldn't give it to her. So I went for the funeral. I reached there 6 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday. And the funeral was at 10 o'clock. I celebrated the Mass. It was so surreal. It was like I was watching a movie of me celebrating the funeral. I was numb. The funeral was over. I stayed with my family for another week. And then I had to come back. I had a long layover in Kuwait. The whole time I was fighting with God. And I said, God, I have dedicated my life to you. Why would you do this? Wouldn't you have given me a chance to hug my mom one last time? I was supposed to see her in a few months. Couldn't you give me that time? Of course, I was still mad because I knew I loved the Lord, but still, it was a lover's quarrel, let's say. Anyway, I came back. Then a month later or 2 months later, I had to celebrate Mass in a nursing home. And I was there. And as the readings were going on, I looked at the people. There were about 20 of them. They were seated, in a semicircle. Out of the 20 people, only 4 of them were in regular chairs. 16 of them were in wheelchairs. And out of the 16, only 2 or 3 had any clue as to what was going on. And as I looked at that, something hit me. And I said, all right, Lord, you know what you're doing. Because just then I remembered that my mother said 2 prayers. Number 1, that none of her children should die before her. She said, there is no pain greater for a mother than to bury a child. And second, she didn't want to be a burden to any of her children. Because my mom had been very active. She had seen all her grandchildren. She came to America 4 times. The only place she wanted me to take her to was Lourdes, and I took her there. She lived a full life. And, God heard her prayers. Do you know what I mean? For me, it was difficult, but for her, it was right. So even in that situation, I understood the words of Paul in the letter to the Romans, where Paul says, everything works unto good for those who love God. Everything works unto good for those who love God. So you got to believe that. In our suffering and our pain, to realize that this God is still holding us in the palm of His hand. So, I will finish with one final joke for the day. So there was a young couple that came home. They were going to have dinner. And the girl announced to the parents, this is the guy I'm going to marry. The parents were shocked because they hadn't met him before. So the wife looks at the husband and says, we don't know anything about the guy. You got to go and talk to him. So the father takes the young man aside and asks him, so what do you do? The young man says, I'm a Bible scholar. I study the Bible. Oh, really? So how do you make money? God will provide. Oh, really? So how are you going to buy a nice engagement ring for my daughter? Do you have the money? I'll study the Bible. God will provide. What about the wedding? It will cost money. How are you going to do that? I will study the Bible. God will provide. Are you going to buy a house? And how will you take care of the children? God will provide. So to every question he says, God will provide. So anyway, the dinner is over, the couple is gone, and the wife asked the husband, so did you talk to the young man? He said, yeah. So what did you find out? Well, the bad news is he had no job, he has no prospects, he has no money, but the good news is he thinks I am God. Okay, God bless you. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Father Britto, for the 2 days. I hope you all enjoy, and I think I enjoy very much for myself. And thank you for helping us, especially help us to know Christ better, to be a friend with Christ, and also to understand about suffering. It's not about punishment, but it's all about in union with Christ. So I hope tonight it helps us to be closer to Christ. So please give a big applause. Thank you, Father Britto, for the 2 nights with us. And please stay for the refreshment. We have a lot of cookies, a lot of drink for you in the back and after the song. So thank you.
Please join us in our closing hymn again, which can be found in your Mother Guerin Psalm book, number 12, Lord, Let Me Walk. Again, it's in your Mother Guerin Psalm book, number 12.
Thank you, Greg and the choir. Let us give them a big applause. Thank you for the 2 nights. And thanks Linda and Mary and Lynn who helped for the refreshment in the back. So please give them a big applause and thanks for all their good work. And please stay for the refreshment afterward. Thank you.